Thank you, Gina. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me okay. This is coming through.
You sound great, Casey.
Great. All right. So I'll introduce myself and my colleague. I'm Casey Davis Kaufman. I'm the Associate Director of the WGBH Media Library and Archives, and I am joined today by my colleague Ren Marchese, who is the Engagement and Use Manager of the WGBH Media Library and Archives. Today we're going to be telling you about the American Archive of Public Broadcasting, which is a digital archive of public television and radio that we co-steward with the Library of Congress. So I'm really excited to be here presenting to you all today, to history librarians, because you really are on the front lines of the audiences that we really want to be reaching and letting them know that this is a resource that they can use in their research and in their teaching. So thank you all for being here. Today, what we're going to do is give you a background and overview of the American Archive of Public Broadcasting, or what we call AAPB. We'll share some thoughts on teaching the archive and to the collection.
Hi, Casey. It's Gina with ACRL. You're really cutting in and out.
Oh, no.
Do you want to try hooking up the actual?
I don't think that will work.
Okay.
Is it coming in clearly right now?
Yes, you do sound better now.
Okay, so just let me know if that happens again.
Will do.
So we'll also give an overview of how to access the archive and some of our curated exhibits and special collections that we want to highlight. And then we'll present a couple of case used already. Public broadcasting, familiar with us between.
Hi, Casey. Sorry, it's Gina again. You're really cutting in and out like every other word.
Oh, gosh. I'm going to move my computer. If you don't
Okay.
mind, just give me one moment. I'm really sorry about that.
No problem.
Okay, we're just, give me one more moment and we'll get this set up. Okay, we should have more stable internet now. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, you sound great.
Okay. And I'm going to share my PowerPoint again, and thank you all for bearing with us. So in case you're not familiar with the American Archive of Public Broadcasting, we are a collaboration between the Library of Congress and Boston public broadcaster WGBH. The initiative was established by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting in 2013, but the idea for an archive can actually be traced back to the Public Broadcasting Act of 1967. The Act created the CPB and authorized them to establish and maintain a library and archive of public broadcasting, and the AAPB is the culmination of this mandate. Our mission is to coordinate a national effort to preserve significant historical content created by public media and provide a centralized web portal for access to the unique programming aired by public media stations over the last 70+ years. So the Library of Congress's Packard Campus for Audiovisual Conservation in Culpeper, Virginia, serves as the preservation arm of this initiative. And WGBH is where Rin and I are located. We are public broadcasting for Boston and also for the nation. We produce about 1/3 of what goes out nationally on PBS, so you're probably familiar with some of these shows that you see here: American Experience, Nova, Frontline, Antiques Roadshow, Masterpiece. And we're also the home to the WGBH Media Library and Archives. Our Media Library and Archives preserves what we produce here at WGBH and all of our administrative assets, but also we manage this initiative, the AAPB, with the Library of Congress. So as I mentioned, the Library of Congress is responsible for the long-term preservation of the digital files that we preserve through the American Archive. And WGBH is responsible for metadata management, maintaining our access systems, and also outreach to participating organizations and to users. And we share governance responsibilities and collaboratively make decisions about policy, collection development, workflows, and navigating copyright. Our goals are lofty. We seek to coordinate a national effort to preserve as much public broadcasting material as possible. We seek to become a focal point for discoverability of public broadcasting material. And we also provide standards such as the PB Core metadata schema, which we manage here, and best practices to public broadcasting stations for storing and preserving their collections, knowing full well we won't be able to preserve everything. And we also seek to facilitate the use of the archive by scholars, educators, students, and others. And we're also very passionate about, just in general, increasing awareness of the significance of public media and its need for preservation. So while the project was in development by CPB back in 2011 and 2012, CPB began with an inventory project where 120 stations were funded to create inventories of all of the tapes held in their possession. This resulted in 2.5 million inventory records, and actually a total of 3 million items were identified when we included universities and other producers that took part in providing tape counts. CPB subsequently funded a large-scale digitization project where 100 public media stations and archives were funded to digitize a percentage of their collections. And during that project, 40,000 hours of historic public media content was digitized. And then at this point, in 2013, CPB selected the Library of Congress and WGBH to steward the collection and carry the initiative forward. So the AAPB website and our online reading room launched in 2015. The more than 50,000 hours of material in the collection, or just over 101,000 items of digitized and born digital material, is accessible for researchers who visit the Library of Congress and WGBH. But we understand that not everyone can get to Boston or to DC. So more than 48,000 programs, or nearly 50% of the collection, is available to anyone in the United States if they visit our website at americanarchive.org, and you can access the streaming video and audio files in what we call our online reading room, which is available for research, educational, and informational purposes. There's no subscription fee or anything. It's a public access collection. And we also provide access to the 2.5 million additional inventory records that were gathered through that inventory project, so that researchers, if they find something still sitting on 3/4-inch tape at Maryland Public Television, can know that this content exists and hopefully be able to access it. So we have participation nationally from content creators and contributors of materials to the archive, which includes currently public broadcasting material from 41 states, plus Washington, D.C. and Guam. We have nearly 120 participating organizations, and the archive includes content produced by over 430 organizations and independent producers. And we aim to grow the archive by up to 25,000 hours per year. So it is not easy to overstate the imperative need for preserving this and other audiovisual materials, which are increasingly at risk of loss to posterity. In 2012, the Library of Congress's National Recording Preservation Plan stated that many endangered analog formats must be digitized within the next 15 to 20 years before further degradation makes preservation efforts all but impossible. Moreover, audiovisual materials are the fastest growing segment of our nation's archives and special collections, as reported by the Library of Congress. And in 1997, the Library of Congress recognized the historic and cultural significance of public broadcasting. In a 1997 television and video preservation report by the Library of Congress, they stated, public television has been responsible for the production, broadcast, and dissemination of some of the most important programs, which in aggregate form the richest audiovisual source of cultural history in the United States. It's not easy to overstate the immense cultural value of this unique audiovisual legacy, whose loss would symbolize one of the great conflagrations of our age, tantamount to the burning of Alexandria's library in the age of antiquity. And scholars who have supported our work have repeatedly complained about the lack of access to audiovisual materials. A historian of the civil rights movement has written to us, "I have long been frustrated by the difficulty of gaining access to the vast audiovisual record of my period." A media historian similarly writes that public broadcasting programs remain locked in the collections of its many member stations. Bringing them out of obscurity would be an immense boon to scholars, not only of media history, but of the era as well. And more recently, we have begun to receive inquiries from scholars seeking not only access to the media individually for their research, for more traditional research, but also to the collection as a data set for emerging forms of digital scholarship. So I'm going to hand it over to Ren to keep us going here and tell you about how the collection can be accessed.
Thanks, Casey. Can everyone hear me okay? So AAPB hopes to provide a centralized web portal of discovery where researchers, educators, scholars, really anyone can find relevant public broadcasting programs existing either on our site or on sites belonging to other archives and stations. With approximately 1,250 public radio and television stations in existence, one access point will aid scholars interested in researching how national or even international topics have been covered in divergent localities over the past 60 plus years. AAPB has made a start at becoming that portal. If stations and archives operating their own websites will send us metadata, we will provide direct links from AAPB to digitized files on the other sites. For a researcher, this would be one-stop shopping. This is how the Digital Public Library of America, or DPLA, operates, and we are actually already making files accessible through searches on the DPLA, and we want to help solve the separate silo syndrome. So our site is accessible, as I put in the chat box, at americanarchive.org. The site is a searchable digital library where users can conduct keyword or advanced searches. They can browse search results, limit their search results, and view and listen to digitized media and access metadata about those programs. We have also created searchable transcripts of every item in the collection using open source speech-to-text tools. On the home page, if you scroll down below the search box, you see a map of our participating organizations. As we mentioned earlier, much of the content in the collection was locally produced, so the archive contains a wealth of materials documenting local communities over the past several decades. You can click on any of the dots or states in the list to be navigated to individual stations and producers that have provided content to the archive. We also curate special collections to highlight materials of particular significance. Special collections feature materials from specific series or collections and provide high-level descriptions and suggestions for searching. We launched this part of our site in November with raw interviews from Ken Burns's The Civil War series, as well as Eyes on the Prize, featuring interviews conducted with participants in the American Civil Rights Movement during the years from the mid-1950s through to 1965. And you can find raw interviews from American Masters, as well as WGBH's American Experience. One of the this week we'll be launching NOVA's 1999 series To the Moon with raw interviews with astronauts such as Buzz Aldrin, so keep an eye out for that. Another one of my favorite series is the Woman series from the 1970s, produced by WNED in New York, and it was a public affairs show series focused on issues important to women in the 1970s. Diving in a bit deeper into the collections, here's a quick view of the Eyes on the Prize homepage. There's something to be said about watching ordinary people talking about the moment they made history, like Rosa Parks, Coretta Scott King, and Melba Biles, who was one of the original children of the Little Rock Nine. These interviews offer your historians an all-access pass to history not recorded in history books. And something worth noting, collections such as Eyes on the Prize and Ken Burns' Civil War series have interviews that with transcripts accompanying, and with our crowdsourcing platforms such as Fixit Plus, we're working on creating more transcripts for searching purposes. Another access point in our collection are the exhibits. We have created a number of topic-based curated exhibits that organize local and national broadcasts into subtopics and provide contextual information. Exhibits differ from special collections in that they bring content together from different sources and have written narratives on that topic by guest curators and staff here at AAPB. Each curated set of selected recordings present a diversity of perspectives concerning the exhibit's focus. Staff here at AAPB and guest curators create exhibits of selected recordings that focus on themes, topics, and events of cultural and historical significance. In the exhibits, curators contextualize digitized primary and secondary source public television and radio materials. Each curated set of selected recordings present a diversity of perspectives concerning the exhibit's focus. Our most accessed exhibits currently are the Speaking and Protesting in America, as well as the Gavel to Gavel, the Watergate Scandal on Public Television exhibit. I'll go more into that pretty soon. Just one quick note, we have digital exhibit internships if you have anyone who might be interested or any historians particularly interested in our collection, so please feel free to send them our way. As mentioned, the Gavel to Gavel Watergate Scandal on Public Television exhibit. It includes a near complete coverage of the hearings. In November, we made available online for the first time Public Television's 1973 Senate Watergate and 1974 House impeachment hearings. The coverage, acclaimed for its even-handedness, brought together for the first time as a team anchors Robert McNeil and Jim Lear, and in the words of Lear, became a watershed event that solidified the place of news and public affairs programming on public television. The exhibit was curated by Library of Congress Junior Fellow Amanda Reichenbach, a history major at Yale, and Jim Lear himself reviewed Amanda's essay that put the coverage into historical context and commented it is as terrific as it is accurate. Because of the geographical breadth of the collection, researchers can use the collection to help uncover ways that national and even global processes played out on the local scene. The long chronological reach from the late 1940s to the present will supply researchers with previously inaccessible primary source material to document change over time. The AAPB includes an extraordinarily diverse collection of programming covering many localities across the U.S. and much that occurred throughout the nation during the past 60+ years. The materials offer unique television and radio programming that document the subjects you see here. And the collection further includes many different types of programming, from debates and news reports to local documentaries, cultural magazines, and raw, unedited interviews with eyewitnesses to historic events, many of which have never been seen by public audiences until now. So I'm going to pass the mic back to Casey, who can continue with the importance of local history.
Thank you, Ren. So the American Archive collection contains a wealth of material, as we've discussed, produced locally for local audiences. These programs represent an untapped historic resource. During the 1960s and 1970s, many historians began to focus on social history or history from the bottom up instead of on national elites. And this emphasis on diversity, Alan Brinkley, a political historian, has written, presumed that the history of the nation is many different stories, no one of which can be considered the main story. And more recently, some historians have also advocated for integrating the national story into wider contexts. The goal is to relate national experiences to larger processes and also to local resolutions, Thomas Bender has written. So the material in the AAPB collection is especially important because of the era it reflects. There remains much basic excavation and interpretive work in recent American history for the present generation of scholars to accomplish. A recent essay noted that American history scholarship pertaining to from the period of 1973 onwards is limited, fragmentary, and politically conflicted. Accounts about later periods, the author concluded, have not really been history. So how do scholars want to access and use a public media archive? Trevor Munoz, the director of the Maryland Institute for Technology and the Humanities at University of Maryland, attended a meeting on sustainability for the AAPB in 2017. And he stated that there are four main ways that scholars may want to use a public media archive. There will be scholars who remain committed to writing in print, but are using digital resources. There are scholars who have desires to take things out of an archive system and recombine them into a new system. And then there are scholars who want to teach with them. And finally, there are scholars who want to use collections as data sets for text mining, audio analysis, image recognition, topic modeling, machine learning, and all of these other keywords that we're all librarians are learning from scholars every day. So just here's an example of how the collection really is valuable for local history. I'm actually from Mississippi, and we have a wealth of material from Mississippi Public Broadcasting from like the late 1960s through the 1980s. And I was able to dive into the collection and find some of the luminaries and local and national writers and civil rights activists and musicians within the collection from Mississippi. So these are conversations, for example, with Willie Morris. We have in the collection 3 examples of writer Willie Morris talking about his writing over time. So you're able to hear him speaking about, you know, what it was like to write North Toward Home at the time that he wrote it, and then 20 years later hear about My Dog Skip. So it's really interesting. The collection doesn't only contain material in English, but also in French, Spanish, and even the Alaskan Indigenous language Yupik. Louisiana Public Broadcasting recently contributed the En Francais collection, consisting of over 200 episodes from the 1980s to early 1990s, broadcast entirely in French. And Radio Bilingue's collection includes many historic public radio programs spoken in Spanish. And Radio Bilingue was founded in 1976 by Hugo Morales, along many Latino activists, farm workers, and community members. So this is also a really important collection. And additionally, we host many historic public broadcasting materials from KYUK in Alaska, which is owned and operated by the Yupik tribe there. So here are just some examples of the types of materials you can find in the collection, from documentaries to news reports. We actually just finished digitizing every broadcast episode of PBS NewsHour and its predecessor series from 1975 through 2018. So all the way back to the McNeil-Lehrer Report and the NewsHour with Jim Lehrer and the Robert McNeil Report. Every nightly episode is available, including all of these local news series that are that we've digitized. And then news magazines, which are another wonderful genre that has historic ties to public broadcasting. We also have call-in radio shows, which are wonderful documents of how a community felt about issues over time. You know, from WILL and from Urbana-Champaign We have the Focus Radio series, where there are daily programs, thousands of them, talking about issues of importance. We have scientists coming on to the show talking about climate change, or at that time what they called global warming, and in the 1980s. And then you're able to hear people from the community call in and ask questions or express their opinions about these subjects. So that's another genre that I find is highly valuable within this public broadcasting collection. And then, as Ren said, unedited interviews, where we have entire hour-long conversations with eyewitnesses to historical events, where only 1 or 2 minutes made it into the final cut of the edited film that was seen on PBS. So we've talked about how to access the collection by going to the website, doing searches, and with the more traditional way. But going back to what I was saying earlier about the different ways that scholars want to access audiovisual collections, both as data sets and in teaching, we've developed additional ways that scholars can access the collection and use it. So I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail. So we have limited research access. We understand that, as I said earlier, we have almost 100,000 items in the collection, and only 50% of the collection is available online. So we've created a limited research access policy where if a scholar finds something in the archive that is not available in the online reading room, they can contact us, and we can provide limited research access to them, which is password-protected, time-restricted access to a selected item that's not otherwise available. And actually here, there's a typo in this email address here. It's actually AAPB_notifications, plural, so make note of that if you're sharing. And we'll send an updated version of the slides afterward. And then we also have embedding. So talking about taking things out of an archive and combining them into a new system. Well, because of copyright restrictions, we're unable to provide actual copies of many of these materials for a scholar to, for example, post them on their own Omeka collection. But we can allow embedding of materials. So this allows for scholars and students to incorporate materials into other systems while we're still able to maintain control over the digital file in respect of copyright and the permissions that we've received from donors. So the materials in the archive can be embedded into digital exhibits or into e-publications or other digital history projects. So we've also developed an application programming interface, or API, that allows for researchers to harvest our metadata records for use in text mining and analysis. And we make our metadata available both as PBCore and MaaD's XML, and documentation is available on our GitHub repository. And Ren, can you send a link to our GitHub repo? As I mentioned earlier, transcript creation is part of our workflow when we add new collections to the archive. Some collections come in with existing transcripts, but for most, we use this open source speech-to-text tool called Caldy to create those transcripts. And we have a transcripts research access policy, which allows for scholars to obtain copies of our JSON and text transcripts via our Transcripts API. We're also working on developing, in the future, potentially easier ways to harvest these records by providing some scripts that they can easily implement into their workflows. So using D3 visualizations in our transcripts, we created a few very, very simple examples of how our data set can be used to illustrate trends and patterns in public broadcasting's coverage of events and topics over time and space. So here you see that the term Pacific is more frequently mentioned on the West Coast, and on the East Coast, Pacific is still frequently used, in some cases nearly as often as the term Atlantic. So again, this is very simple and doesn't come close to what I know a lot of scholars are doing with regard to data visualization. This timeline shows the frequency of the use of the names Nixon, Ford, Carter, and Reagan over time within our transcripts. You see that Carter is more frequently discussed in the late 70s and into the early 80s, Reagan throughout the 80s, and Nixon had a spike just after the early 90s. And the Nixon Library opened in 1990, Pat Nixon died in 1993, and Richard Nixon died in 1994. So that might be a reason why we see that spike in 1990, but that would require a lot more investigation than I put into it. Here you see how often state names are mentioned together in the same recording. So for example, Wisconsin and Minnesota are discussed together more frequently than Wisconsin and Indiana. So we also recently developed a new media as a data set policy, understanding that use of the images and the audio themselves may support additional research possibilities beyond what the metadata and transcripts can provide. The media as a data set, or MaaD policy, allows for scholars to obtain low-resolution copies of digital media in the archive for non-consumptive bona fide research and scholarly purposes. A couple of examples of innovation in this area of computation by humanists are the University of Texas at Austin's High Performance Sound Technologies for Access and Scholarship, or HPSTAS group, and the University of Richmond's Distant Viewing Lab. So I would suggest you checking out their work to see some examples of how digital humanities scholars are using audiovisual collections as data sets for machine learning purposes. Oops. Let's see. So here's an example of what we see as ways that you can help us by spreading the word about the AAPB. These are just some suggested courses in which you might want to reference the AAPB in LibGuides that you're creating. So American history courses, public history, communications and journalism, film and media studies. I know that also academic libraries create resource guides around different types of resources that are available in the library. So you could include the AAPB among lists of digital collections and archives, news and newspapers, broadcast news, multimedia and audiovisual resources, and arts and culture. So I'm going to give you a little bit of information about a few case studies of use of the archive by scholars. These are just some brief case studies where we've seen scholars who are interested in using the AAPB as data sets. The examples I have are not historians using the collection, but definitely relevant to what we're talking about with regard to using audiovisual materials in new and experimental ways. So Brandeis University has been working with the AAPB to use our collection as a data set with the goal of training and refining output of their existing open source tools that they use for computational linguistics and research and analysis. Their goal is to improve upon the Language Application Grid project, which supports computational linguistics analysis currently of more textual-based materials, but they are interested in using our collection as a data set to build upon that framework to allow for analysis of video, images, and audio. So they are interested in using the AAPB, especially the PBS NewsHour collection, because of its long chronological reach and the availability of nightly episodes between 1975 and 2018 of the PBS NewsHour collection, which also offers a consistent news program structure over those years, which aids in training tools on more consistent, on a consistent data set. We're also collaborating with them because we see the value of this collaboration, not only helping them in their research, but of us benefiting from the metadata that's being generated through their research. For example, we're working with them on a project to develop the computational linguistics applications for multimedia services, which is an extension of the LAPS grid, which is going to enable the analysis of audiovisual materials in the future, which not only will help these computational linguists to further their research in linguistics research, but also help archives with generating automated metadata about their collections. So they're using the PBS NewsHour collection and also New Jersey Nightly News. And again, we're able to provide them with our proxy files as part of our media as a data set policy. Proxy files being the low resolution video files, and also transcripts and our descriptive metadata. So again, they are trying to move beyond text data as part of their computational linguistics research and move towards time-based media with video and audio. So the AAPB is providing that data set for them to use in this analysis. For example, some of the types of information they're looking to be able to automate through these tools are identifying objects within video frames, such as here's the sun, this is the sky, this is a tree, this is a person, this is a specific person, this is Jim Lehrer, or other non-speech sounds like, you know, a train passing by, or dogs howling, or applause, or music. And then graphics on screen, for example, the opening and closing credits of a public television program. So here's another example. Dartmouth is using the AAPB for media studies research. We're working with Dartmouth Film and Media Studies Department as part of the Media Ecology project, which is a project that seeks to provide online access to primary moving image research materials and engage new forms of scholarly production and online publishing. The MEP or Media Ecology Project Ecosystem includes tools such as MediaThread, Scalar, and Onomy.org, which you may be familiar with, scholars using at your university. MediaThread is a platform that supports multimedia analysis within a communal environment. So instructors using MediaThread are able to designate online collections of source materials for a given course and post assignments. And then their students are able to lift video, audio, and image items from those collections and annotate them at the timestamp, and then embed them into compositions within a course-specific website. Scalar allows for more long-form web authoring and publishing. And Onomy.org is a site where researchers can create and share folksonomies and taxonomies and other forms of controlled vocabularies that can be used within the annotations that are created in MediaThread. So we're working with Dartmouth on the Civil Rights Newsfilm Collection Project, which is a collaboration between Dartmouth and a few audiovisual archives that are listed here. The goals of this project are to engage scholars and students to create annotated collections of television news film from multiple archives, and the focus being civil rights and social justice. And what we're doing through our collaboration with Dartmouth is we are providing access to material available in our online reading room through the Media Ecology Project's MediaThread platform. So within the Media Ecology Project platform, users are able to explore materials from the AAPB collection alongside archival materials from other collections and incorporate them within their coursework and their research. So the students are able to access our collection and create time-based annotations that describe specific clips and then incorporate them into course assignments, such as writing a narrative about what they found within specific programs, and then also provide the annotations. We are actually taking these annotations that the students and the researchers are creating, and we are hoping to be able to incorporate those back into our own repository to aid and improve search and discoverability within our collection. So the resources that are being used for this project are selected public television and radio programs related to the civil rights movement and the later movements related to civil rights, such as Black Power movement. And so we're hosting the AAPB materials on our server, and they're able to be streamed through the MediaThread platform, and then our metadata is harvested via an API. So this is an example of some of the time-based annotations that have been created, and we're still very in the early processes of reviewing these and seeing whether they actually are useful for incorporating them into our repository and making the collection more discoverable. So finally, I wanted to give a third example of how the archive is being used at the New School by a student who is working on a Master of Science degree in data visualizations at the Parsons School of Design. So his motivation was to use the AAPB collection to explore the ways in which environmental issues and climate change have been depicted in public media over time. He developed a visual search tool and exploratory interface allowing for navigating the AAPB content through 4 visual expressions, through word clouds, through a map, through a timeline, and through a genre cloud. So I have a video here, and we might be running out of time, and it's only about 3 minutes. But if I don't have time to show it, you'll have access to these slides, and you can take a look at the actual work that he's done. Let me see what time it is.
2:40.
Oh, so we should probably wrap up. You'll have the link here, though. So this is the end of the presentation, and I know that was a lot of information, but we wanted to get as much out there as possible to you, and hopefully you can spread the word to all of the historians and the students that you work with on a day-to-day basis, and we will provide you with these slides so that you can refer back to them at points in the future. Does anyone have any questions? What are some of the public broadcasting programs you wish were available online? Well, again, a lot of the collection that is currently available in the AAPB are local programs that were produced by Louisiana Public Broadcasting or Maryland Public Television or Ohio University of Ohio's public radio station. A lot of these are local programs that were made locally, distributed locally, and are now for the first time made available to a national audience. And that is a strength of the collection, but we are also looking to expand the collection to include more of the national programs that are very well known to everyone across the nation, like Frontline, Nova, American Experience. However, a lot of, as you probably are aware, there are often more rights issues with regard to the national programs and also nationally distributed documentaries, third-party footage, third-party, contractual limitations with talent and stuff like that. So, but we are navigating those issues, and we did just finish the News Hour collection, which is a nice feather in our cap for trying to get other really well-known public television programs to want to be part of this initiative. We're also currently working to preserve the Sesame Street collection, all 50 years of Sesame Street. But this collection will be available on site only at the Library of Congress and WGBH, but it will be preserved and it will be accessible for those who are able to visit. And Rin's also going to share a link with you to a Reddit AMA, Ask Me Anything, that we did a few months ago that was geared toward telling historians and other scholars about the AAPB. And it includes a lot of references to other collections that we might not have had time to talk about today that are within the AAPB. Do you have any other questions or ideas on how we can reach more scholars to spread the word about the archive? And how librarians can help us with that? Oh, it looks like we have another question. Do we envision including more born digital resources in the future? Yes. We are aiming to grow the archive by up to 25,000 hours per year, and that includes digitizing content off of magnetic tape that are still sitting on shelves, but also preserving born digital programs. For example, we just got a hard drive in from Think TV, which produced a show called the Ohio Heritage Fellows in collaboration with Ohio Humanities Council, and this was a born digital program, and we are ensuring that it is preserved and working with them to get copies of ongoing programs in the future. So that's just one example, but we are definitely adding lots of born digital programs to the collection. And also, if you have public television and radio stations on your campus or in your community, let us know, and because we'd love to reach out to them. Ask me if they're excited about anything in the collection. Let's see. Academic conferences, yes. We went to AHA last year, and we're hoping to go to OAH this coming year, and maybe ALA. Did you have any thoughts on some of the collections that you think might be of interest to the historians that you work with? History of environmentalism. We have a climate change curated exhibit, and we actually the NewsHour did a really good job of covering the issue of all of the issues surrounding the environment over time, and especially with climate change as well. So we're hoping to add those materials to the climate change exhibit in the future. But and we also have a wonderful collection from Southern California Public Radio, which includes it's all stories about the environment over time. So, but yes, I will follow up with you, Alan, and send you some links. No, we should track usage of resources by categories. We do have a Google Analytics account, and we track how many people are coming to the website, how frequently, how long they're staying on the site. We are able to dive down to see what pages they're landing on and what pages are accessed the most. And the curated exhibits and the special collections are definitely the most trafficked pages on the website. But when we are able to see like what specific items are of most interest as well. We actually have the most popular record on the AAPB website for a while was actually a metadata record for a program that was not even digitized, but had a really nice description about from Vermont Public Television about some decision that Bernie Sanders made when he was the mayor of Burlington. So that was really interesting. But the protesting and the Watergate exhibits are high up there, as is the climate change exhibit. And we have several other exhibits underway because we know that those are what people find as useful, or at least the general public, the people who are coming to the website, find as nice jumping off points for diving into the collections.
Is there any way we can become more accessible?
And if you have any other ways that the archive can be further used or made more accessible or usable by you and the scholars that you work with, please let us know, because we're always looking for feedback. All right, well, thank you all very much for hanging in there and listening to our presentation. And we look forward to hearing from you, hopefully. And we really appreciate you spreading the word to the historians and others that you work with. Thank you.